I'll explain what they do. One gorgeous spring morning a few years ago, while my friends back home were settling into their day and perhaps thinking of spare moments of their children, as parents do, I sat on a tiny wooden chair in a dirt yard, looking up into 20 or more caramel-colored faces. Behind the group, the yard ended in a sheer slope that became the side of a mountain. At my back was a simple cinder block house with a tin roof and a chicken coop on one end. A mother sat on the front stoop, picking lice from her small son's shaved head. I tried not to think of that going on so close behind me. I tried not to wonder if lice could jump, and how far. Instead, I studied the people around me, young, curious women with beautiful skin, and older, more reserved women with creased brows and thick black braids wound tightly around their scalps. Their faces were shy, but also kind and patient, intent and hopeful. Mayan faces that very few outsiders would ever see. They had been embroidering their clothing, they told me, since their world was made, since the beginning of time. A dozen yards away, the mountain wind clattered through the leaves of an oak. I had come to Chiapas, a state in southern Mexico, to see if lending small amounts of money to impoverished women could change their lives. That was just my cover story. I had really come looking for meaning and purpose. I badly wanted to regain the happiness that had been wrenched from me 3 years earlier by the death of my son in a car accident. Without him, neither my husband nor I had known what to do with ourselves. We'd been untethered, viciously cut loose from any semblance of normal life. We were sliding through space with no sense of up or down and no solid ground in sight. But perched among the women's woven skirts and looking up into their smiles, I sensed that I was finally regaining my equilibrium. The earth beneath my feet felt firm and trustworthy. I was somewhere I had never expected to be, carrying a gratefulness that was equally unforeseen. I was beginning to heal. Perhaps, as they say, it was the passage of time that saved me. Maybe I would have righted myself even if I had stayed home, kept working at my job, and never set out on the quest I chose for myself, a search for lasting ways to help the poor, sick, and suffering of the world, abroad and close to home. People in deep grief do recover. For me, though, recovery and resumption of my previous routine seemed like a hollow ambition. I again wanted a zestful, joyful, purposeful life that, frankly, didn't seem possible in my existing circumstances. I wanted, I realized, to search for answers to questions about which I casually wondered in between the meetings and errands that dominated my days. Those questions could all be rolled into one. What does it take to live in service to others? Not knowing what else to do in my now childless existence, I set out to discover the answers. I hadn't expected my journey to be terribly long. I figured I'd gather trusted strategies and the kinds of tips that might be listed in a handbook for helpers. Things like, be on the lookout for inventive ideas, and make sure your time and money are efficiently used. Those are solid principles, yes, but they're not in themselves transformative. To my surprise, I found that searching for selfless service, seva, as I came to call it, requires me to examine every facet of myself, from what I believe to how I interact with the people around me, all of them, including the ones I don't like or respect. In time, I realized that in seeking to help others, I had embarked on a profoundly spiritual journey. All this was becoming clear as I perched on my diminutive seat with my knees poking up, watching women pull pesos out of warm plastic bags to pay this month's installment on their loans. They were running cottage industries, making tortillas or embroidering clothes for tourists. By earning their own money, the theory went, they would improve their living standard and win a new measure of respect in their families and communities. But success turned on many factors, a number of which were completely out of their control. I knew it, and the loan officer sitting at my elbow knew it. If the women themselves realized it, they gave no sign. So many of us long to help people in pain and trouble. So many of us. Yet we do it awkwardly and too often in a burst of goodwill that can't be sustained when the path grows rocky. So many organizations embark on causes that are lost from the start because they rest on shaky foundations. What matters most, it turns out, is not how many milestones they reach or deliverables they produce, but the willingness of their staff members to approach problems openly and with suggestions rather than seemingly surefire solutions. This will sound to many of my former colleagues in the nonprofit world like unrealistic drivel, but it's the truth. I know it's true because I've spent time with organizations where heart-to-heart connections with clients are the first measure of success. These groups are among the most effective at changing lives in lasting ways. They must still list their milestones and deliverables if they take in grant money. But above all else, their programs are based on building relationships with the people they help. Beside me on the mountain that day, Frances Mendez, the loan officer, spoke with utmost kindness to a woman who seemed confused and upset. Apparently she didn't understand that her loan payment wasn't quite sufficient. "You can do this," Mendez said, not with her words, but with her kind eyes and humble choice of seating, the schoolgirl's chair so low that her clients towered above her. Mendez was one of the most caring, committed people I met on my travels. She clearly loved her work and her clients. I will remember her all my life. But with only an 8th grade education and virtually no formal training, she lacked the credentials to be given much meaningful responsibility in aid programs run by richer countries. Her most important assets were not something that could be listed on a resume. They were her patience and compassion. In a well-known poem, the mystical Hindi poet Rabindranath Tagore wrote, "I slept and dreamt that life was joy." That had been me, slumbering in the comfortable mist of family and love. But I was jolted from sleep by the one tragedy parents most fear. I awoke and saw that life was service, the poem continues. But that was me also, though the realization had not been instantaneous. And finally, I acted and behold, service was joy. I was living the poem. Life for me had become service. It was what I most wanted to do if I could no longer have my son with me in this world, and by now what I would still want, even if he were miraculously returned to me. As I studied Seva, not with manuals or books, but from interacting with the people who knew best what to do, I began to see that yes, selfless service might someday bring me back to joy. Not an existence free of problems, but one of significance and deep contentment. I never ever wonder anymore if my life has meaning, one of the Seva workers I meet would tell me. On that spring morning in Chiapas, I was still many miles from my destination, but I knew without question I was on the right path.